Welcome to the Overcome Diversity podcast. I'm your host, Michael Allison. Today's guest is Joanne Greene. She's an author, speaker, and someone who has been through her own fair share of adversity and here to tell us about her story of overcoming adversity. I can't wait to get into this story. Let's go. Hey, Joanne, thank you so much for joining the Overcoming Adversity podcast. It's a pleasure to have you here.
I'm honored.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So I know we're talking backstage about your story of adversity, and I'm pretty inspired. And if you could tell us a little bit about your book, because you have so many profound stories about it. Tell us about your story and what readers can get from your book.
Sure. So like everyone else, I had various challenges throughout life. We all do. That's really important to acknowledge.
Mhm.
And we have tools or we don't have tools to meet those challenges. So at the age of 58, I was leaving work, crossing the street. Actually, I was heading home to hear my candidate, then candidate Barack Obama, debate Mitt Romney.
Mhm.
And I walked into a crosswalk in broad daylight. A car stopped for me. And just as I got in front of that car, I heard what sounded like an explosion. It didn't sound like a car hitting a car because usually when you think of a car accident, you hear a screech of brakes and then a crash. And this was just a crash because a guy who we believe was probably drunk had come back from Oakland A's game wearing full Oakland A's regalia. They had won. Driving a truck, apparently was looking elsewhere and didn't realize he was going 50 miles an hour. He slammed into the car that had stopped for me. Thankfully, the car that had stopped for me was a sedan and not an SUV. If it had been an SUV, I would have gone under and we would not be having this conversation right
Wow.
now. But because the sedan was low enough, I was flipped up onto the hood of the car and she was catapulted 50 feet down the street with me on her hood, my head banging against her windshield, and then I fell off onto the ground. And I was alive and I was conscious, but I was very badly broken. And this was not the first thing that had happened in my life that was really difficult, but it was the thing that really propelled me to grow in the ways that I needed to grow to change as a person because for the first time in my life, I couldn't do anything. I was completely at the mercy of those around me. I was dependent on others. I was in pain, and they told me that the recovery would be a year to a year and a half.
Oh my God.
So, I have to say, Michael, I had just come out of a period of great loss. I had lost my mother and my sister, who were kind of like my right arm and my left arm,
Yeah.
within a 5-month period. And I went from being the baby of the family to being the matriarch of the family
Mhm.
overnight. And a few years later, my brother died suddenly of a hemorrhagic stroke. Exactly the same age I am now, by the way, and exactly the same age at which my dad had died of the same thing. So I found myself as the sole surviving member of my original family, and my brother had 5 kids and multiple grandchildren. My sister had 2 kids, and since she's passed, she's had 3 grandchildren. And I very much saw part of my purpose to lead this family and carry on the traditions and let these young people know who their parents were and how they grew up. Um, and when I was hit by the car, it was like I said to the universe or God or whatever, really? Like, really? I haven't been through enough. And I know, Michael, you must have felt that way so many times in your life. Like, have I not? Like, why? Why is this happening now? And the real answer to that was because it was an opportunity. It was an opportunity for me to grow. And I am very lucky. I mean, enormously lucky. I not only came out of that accident, but a series of other things, including a cancer diagnosis and some other things. I'm fine. I'm turning 70 and I am in better health and in better shape than I've ever been in, which is so confusing. And I think part of it is that I learned certain lessons and I wrote the book so that I could share those lessons.
I was going to ask you this because to hear your story of all of these adversities and challenges that you face, I could see someone easily getting depressed. I could see someone easily putting the blame in like this type of situation, as in I have been through so many things, and for these things to start stacking and stacking and compounding, and now you just mentioned that you were in a situation to the point of where you were in hospital and depending on somebody else. Can you take us or give us a snapshot of what that was like for you mentally to know that I'm in this particular situation, and how did you find the courage, the guts to even push through this, persevere through this, to get through this?
So, first of all, after a trauma, you not only have all the physical pain, but you have the psychological pain as well.
Right.
And I was having flashbacks that were very debilitating. And for instance, one of the only things I could do when I came home from the hospital was sit uncomfortably and try to watch television. You can't imagine how many car accidents are on television. Like I every 2 seconds somebody
Yes.
and I it would send me into a just I would go into the fetal position and be sobbing and shaking and it would last. So some of the things I did, one of the things I did that I think anybody can do, and I really, really want to stress this point, is to remember that as awful as any moment is of despair, of physical pain, of fear, of depression, as you say, because of course I had depression. I had suffered from depression earlier in my life, and this, of
Mhm.
course, kicked it right back up again. Is to tell yourself that this is a moment and this moment will pass. This too shall pass. My mom used to say it to me, and I rolled my eyes because it sounded so antiquated. This too shall pass, right? It's so true and it's so helpful. So that was one thing. And to just say, this is a moment. This is right now. This isn't forever. Another thing was to count your blessings. It's a basic thing we are all told again and again. And it's very hard to feel sorry for yourself and feel grateful at the exact same time. And I'll tell you, the gratitude will win out. And if you sit there and say, yeah, I can't do anything for myself, but how lucky am I to have a husband who works for himself and works from home and is going to be able to be at my beck and call essentially. If I need food, he'll make it or get it somehow. I have a community that will show up for me and there will be somebody to walk the dog because I literally couldn't be left alone for the 15 minutes that it would take to
Wow.
walk the dog. I have friends who will cook meals and deliver them to my home. I am not going to be able to get my salary on which I depend, but first I have a ton of sick leave and I'm going to use every bit of that. And when that's done, I'm going on disability. And granted, that's humiliating and it's so frustrating to deal with that bureaucracy. And also, it's not a lot of money. You don't get even a good percentage of your salary. But even with that, we weren't going to lose the house. I
Right.
wasn't going to miss a meal. So I would think about all the people in this country who are food insecure and all the people who are homeless. And I would say, thank goodness I am not going to fall into that situation because we've saved enough. We're okay. We're going to be okay. So those were some of the ways I got through it.
I want to talk about something that I think is important that you said earlier as well too, because losing a family member, and you're a good majority of your family members, right? And now you're solely the family matriarch, where people are depending up on you. Can you talk a little bit about the responsibility of what that came with and the pressures of what that came with in regards to now you're like a role model. You're now someone that's being depended upon. Now you're looking to lead the way and share some of the things that's within your family legacy and things like that. What were some of the things that like instantly propelled you into that, as in regard preparing yourself, your mindset for that? What are some things I'm going to start teaching? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So first of all, I would say that unconsciously, I think I draw strength from my ancestors.
Hmm.
Like so many Americans, I come from a family of immigrants who left where they were being persecuted for their religion, where there was no economic opportunity, and left and got on a boat to be sick for however long it took to get here from Europe, and came to this country not speaking the language, not having any skills, not being educated, and they just figured it out. They just rose to the occasion. So I think unconsciously, there's a survivor in me. And, of course, I have family that died in the Holocaust, all of it, and so I think it was just there where, and I'll tell you one horrible moment was after my brother died, and the whole family's there. He lived in Las Vegas, and his wife was from a very different culture, and she was absolutely doing the best she could. But I wanted to also kind of infuse some of our culture and our religious background into this so that his kids and my sister's kids could all have a context in which to experience this loss. 2 weeks later was Passover. Everyone was flying into my house from all over the country in our family. And then my brother suddenly dies. And it's now 2 weeks after they've lost their dad, they've lost their grandfather, and they all still came. And I had to put on a Passover Seder. And it was like, let's do this. It was a real feeling of let's do this. This is my role. This is what I was put on this earth for, was to put one foot in front of the other and be strong and march forward. My mom was a really strong person. My sister was a very strong person. They were role models for me. And I also knew I had to do it my way. My sister she was a social justice warrior in many ways. Her Seder, I'll give you an example. We would listen to Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech as part of our Seder. She had incorporated that in so that the children would understand struggle toward freedom from enslavement. I'm going to get emotional when I talk about this. And so I wanted to take everything she had given to me and add 3 more layers onto that. So at our Passover Seder, we have a recording of my husband's grandmother talking about how she left her village the day that all of the Russian soldiers came in and burned down the homes of all the Jews and raped and pillaged and did all of that, and how she left. She was only a teenager by herself and made her way to the United States. Her grandparents said, go, you save your life. Whatever happens to us will happen, but you go. So it's a matter of saying, I'm going to step up and do what I can. I may not do it right. I may not be the best at it, but I'm going to give it my all and try. And I have different gifts. I say to my grandchildren every year, I write them a letter on their birthday. And the first letter I wrote to my granddaughter said, I'm not going to be that grandmother who does crafts with you and bakes with you, because that's just not who I am. But I will be the grandmother who gets in trouble with you, who makes up wonderful stories, who dresses up in costumes and acts silly. I'm going to be the silly grandmother because that's who I am. And I'm just going to be me. And that's what you need to do, is be the best you, not try to be somebody else, but be the best you and meet every moment with everything you have, all your strength.
I love that. I love the fact where sometimes we don't think we understand where our strengths come from, and for you to now realize that, as it probably happens subconsciously, but knowing, like, you really truly know, like, the foundation of your family, and know that's where that strength came from. I think that's truly inspiring, because oftentimes I talk to people and I'll ask them, where did this resilience come from within you? And it's really from some of these things that was part of your upbringing that developed that character that actually helped shape who you are. So I think that's truly, truly important. I want to talk about something that you had mentioned, being able to be vulnerable and ask for help. Sometimes it takes a brave person or a brave soul to do so. Can you speak to our audience a little bit about what was it like for you to know that you was in a vulnerable position but willing to ask for help when you were at your lowest point?
I'm glad you asked me that question because that was one of the hardest things in the world for me. I am
Mhm.
fiercely independent. I'm somebody who says, I'll do it. You know, I'm not good on a committee because I don't want to sit and talk about it. I just want to know what is the task that needs to be done and I want to get it done. I'm the person who wants to drive because I feel safer when I'm behind the wheel, when I'm controlling things. I my memoir is subtitled A Memoir of Letting Go because part of what I needed to learn is to let go of control. I say control is a seductive illusion. We really are not in control. We just think we are. And there are some things that we can control, but we can control how we respond to what happens to us, but we cannot control what happens to us. I was in a category 4 hurricane and I could not control that. You know that story, Michael,
I
right?
do, I do, I do.
I had to just get myself through it. And ultimately, I had to be airlifted out of Mexico by the Mexican military. The American military was not coming and rescuing me. The Mexican military was flying me to Tijuana, where then I had to somehow cross the border and take a bus to San Diego. And, in all of these situations, it's where how am I going to get through? And how am I? And one of the many lessons I had to learn was that I had to ask for help, that I had to depend upon others, that I had to not only ask for help, but I had to appreciate that help, however it was given. Because here's the thing, they're not going to do it the way you do it, right?
Mm, right.
My husband certainly was not preparing my meals the way that I would have prepared my meals. He wasn't showing up necessarily at the moment that I rang the little bell because we had a little bell. It's very old school. And I had to say, thank you for showing up. Thank you for doing it that way, for doing it at all. Because had you not, I wouldn't have eaten. So it was humbling, and I needed to learn to let go of my need for everything to be perfect. I had always wanted to be the perfect wife, the perfect this, the perfect mother, the perfect friend, the perfect daughter, the perfect sister. And it's not possible to be all of those things. And so something has to give. And, usually we get sick, right? We make ourselves sick when we're trying to hold ourselves to this impossible standard. And now, at this point in my life, I am saying, so you didn't get anything done today except take care of your own health. You went to an exercise class, you hiked, you made healthy food, you took the dog for a walk, you called a couple of people who are really having a tough time because here's part of what I committed to. I made a list of the things I learned. They're in the book, like the top 10 lessons I learned. And one of them was I'm going to always make sure that my life is structured in such a way that I have enough time to show up for people who need me because all those people showed up for me.
Mm,
And that was critical. And here's the thing, when you're showing up for somebody else, you feel like your best self. You
yeah.
really do. I mean, what is more important, like getting on another podcast to promote my book or calling my brother-in-law who's in assisted living and seeing if he needs me to pick anything up for him or if a visit would make him happy. I bring my dog to see him and he just experiences the dog. It's so basic. It's just such basic love back and forth. And I can facilitate that. So that's just more rewarding. And that's what's more meaningful in life.
Absolutely. You mentioned something that I think is important for listeners to understand. Going through those situations, you showed empathy and you showed a high level of gratitude. Can you talk? Where did that come from? Where did that attitude come from? And the practicing of it, did someone teach that to you? Did you just figure it out on your own? Because I think that's something that's important. That's an important skill and an important behavior and an important trait that people should have.
A combination of messages that I had gotten throughout my life from different sources, certainly from my religion, which I'm not, I'm a very progressive, liberal Jew, and I know that really Orthodox Jews are saying blessings every couple of minutes throughout the day. They're saying thank you for everything. And so I drew upon that. I hadn't lived this way before, but it's like, thank you for this coffee. Thank you for that rainbow. Thank you for my body working the way it should, that's enabling me to walk. It's constant thinking, thinking, thinking. So there was that message. There was self preservation, because in the absence of gratitude, I would have gone right down that rabbit hole. A friend of mine said to me at one point, I was crying. I mean, I did a lot of crying, right? I did a lot of like, oh my God, how am I going to get through this? A year and a half. I understood a 2-week recovery. I'm a high energy person. This is me at 70. So can you imagine me at like 35, 45, 50? The fact that I couldn't move, it was like energy just coursing through my body
Mhm.
that had no outlet and no place to go. And I was feeling so sorry for myself. And this is my friend Jessica said, you can visit the pity pot, but don't be packing your bags and moving in. And that really stuck with me, because it was like, yeah, feel badly, cry, and then dust yourself off, girl, and just take the next step forward and say, okay, did you get that out of your system? Good. Now what can you do from a prone position? What can you do? And there were lots of things I could do, and one of them was count my blessings.
When speaking of counting your blessings and being thankful, can you talk a little bit about who was in your corner supporting you as you was going through these challenges and phases? I think it's important, as much as you was reaching out to people and you were making those phone calls and just doing these things that was keeping you going. Can you give us some insight in regard, like who was supporting you, who was in your corner, who was encouraging you, and else motivating you to continue just to keep on pushing each day until you got through this recovery phase?
So I have 4 points to make on that. Number one, family, 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 and family. So my husband and my sons really showed up, and I will eternally be grateful to them for that. Secondly, I have good friends for whom I show up. And even before this, somehow I learned in life that you can't get through without good friends. And I say this to all the women in your audience, man, your girlfriends are so necessary and so important. There's just something about good girlfriends. So that would be number two. Number three, community. I'm a part of a community, and everybody should be part of a community. And I don't care if it's a faith-based community or a neighborhood association, or it's a sport you do and you have people with whom you share a passion for whatever it is, doesn't matter. Community is key. And finally, number four, I thankfully had the resources to get professional help, and I got professional help. I was able to go to a particular type of therapist called a somatic therapist. There's many other kinds of therapists that specialize in trauma. So this was one. There are others, but the one I chose helped me to not have that trauma lodge in my body.
Mhm.
And I only went for 9 sessions, because that's what it took to get past the trauma. The very first session, so this is a really good one for people who face adversity. Often we hold trauma in our bodies. And on the very first session, it was a little woo woo, this somatic therapy. And I wasn't sure I believed in all this. She had me close my eyes and kind of try to get into a meditative state and recreate that moment where I stepped off the curb before the car hit me and put myself in a bubble where nothing could hurt me. And I'm thinking, what the heck is this? And can I really imagine this? And then she said, and I want you to turn your head to the right and see the car coming. And I tried as hard as I could to turn my head to the right. And Michael, I swear as the day is long, I could not move my head. And my eyes popped open and I said, I can't move my head. And she smiled and she said, yep, the trauma has already lodged in your neck. And I said, but my neck's not injured. It's one of the few parts of my body that's not injured. And she said, it's not going to be. We're going to fix that. And by the end of that session, I got full range of motion in my neck because she had me slowly understand that I could look to where that car was coming from and it wasn't going to hurt me again. So I had professional help that gave me some tools, and she gave me a lot of tools to help with the traumatic aspects of it, the psychological damage that could have been permanent. And that
Wow.
for so many people, people talk about PTSD, and I assumed that I had it. My best friend is a psychologist, and she said to me, don't assume that you have PTSD. The D stands for disorder. You don't have a disorder. You have a very normal trauma response. And it doesn't have to turn into a disorder because we're going to work with you so that you manage it. Yes, you have post traumatic stress, but it doesn't have to impact you for the rest of your life. And we're going to work and work and work. And now I couldn't cross a street when I was first able to walk again, which that took months. I wasn't able to cross the street. I was terrified. My
Mhm.
heart rate would go up when I saw cars whizzing by, all of it. And now I don't have that problem at all.
As you were telling me that, I was thinking about when I went to Emory Hospital and I went through therapy, and we went through our prolonged exposure therapy. And it was for me to get past some of the things that was affecting me mentally. And it was from my scene in Iraq when I dealt with grief for a very long time and guilt and a shame in regards to losing my best friend and getting blown up. And that was one of the stepping stones for me to even get past some of the trauma that I was dealing with, and I could not let that go. So to hear that you went through that similar process in essence, I think is truly, it speaks towards having professional help in regards to getting past certain things that you can't do yourself, because some of those things are tied to like the limiting beliefs and some of the things, the trauma that we're holding on to. And, and you also said that you couldn't even move your neck and the pain is it's not even in your neck or
Right.
anything like that.
I had done that one to myself. You talk about survivor guilt. 2 years after the accident, when I was
Uh-huh.
fully recovered, I got a surprise cancer diagnosis. No symptoms. I went for a routine exam. By the way, another message to your listeners: when they tell you to get a colonoscopy because you're 50, or a breast, a mammogram, go to every single one of those tests, because I had absolutely no symptoms. Nobody in my family had this disease. And I woke up from the test and they said, Mrs. Greene, we think you have cancer. And I was like, what? And then it was only stage 1. I had surgery and I was fine. And I had such survivor guilt, because why couldn't that have been my sister's story?
Hmm.
My sister, they discovered it was stage 3. She was lucky enough to live 5 years. I'm fine. I'm cancer free. So I had horrible survivor guilt. Why couldn't I have had stage 2 and she could have had stage 2? And we could have both had a lifetime of treatment and lived. But instead, she died and I'm alive. And not only did she die, but I'm fine. Why am I fine? Well, I have an answer for that. I'm fine because I have a lot of work to do.
Mhm.
And I have a role to play with her children and her grandchildren, because she's not here to do it and she's counting on me to do it.
Speaking of work to do, I think this is truly your calling. And I think this is truly your calling because it speaks towards you now having all of these experiences, but now you're at a different level to like embrace humanity. Can you speak towards what does that feel like now, knowing that, yeah, you've been through the gauntlet of a lot of things, but now you can see it from a different perspective?
Well, first of all, I have to say, talking is my wheelhouse. I was in radio for the bulk of my career. Writing a book was the hardest thing I ever did. I am not writing another one. Thank you very much. I do a podcast called In This Story with Joanne Greene, 4 minutes long, because nobody has an attention span anymore. And they're all little stories. But I'm not done. And I think my next step might be speaking, being a speaker, like an inspirational, motivational kind of speaker. I still have the energy. Right now, I'm still promoting the book, so I'm speaking about the book, but at some point, that's going to fizzle. And I won't be speaking specifically about the book, but I'll be speaking about the lessons in the book. And in parentheses, she wrote a book. But really, my message is how to, the same as your message, Michael, we're doing the same work. How to overcome adversity, how to move through huge, huge, insurmountable or seemingly insurmountable challenges and come out not only come out on the other side, but be able to help other people to also come out on the other side.
I 1000% agree. I think overcoming adversity helps shapes the character that you are and shapes so many lessons. And there's always someone that's always in need of help that's going to learn from your story and take lessons from your story. So most definitely, I 1000% agree with you.
The most gratifying thing for me now is when someone reaches out to me to say they had surgery or something is going on in their family and they read my book and it really gave them strength. Or I just heard from another friend, I just bought this book for my mom because she's going through a really hard time and she's really focused on the aging process and how debilitating it is, and you embrace the aging process. As I said to you earlier, see these folds on my neck and these lines over here? I earned those. I earned every single one. Those are wisdom. Those are experience. Those are life experience lines. And so, aging is a privilege. I'm not running away from aging. I'm embracing aging. This is what it looks like. And how to combat it is not to have plastic surgery, it's to go and take a yoga class and hike up a mountain or even just a small hill, whatever you can do, and breathe in the fresh air if you can find some, and look at all the miracles, count the miracles all around us.
I was just going to ask you that, but I want you to elaborate a little bit because I think it's truly inspiring. At your age, having the energy that you have now and enthusiasm that's pouring through the screen to me, how do you handle, manage, and deal with like your overall health, your well-being, your mental state? What are some things that you're doing or practicing that our listeners could take as some wisdom pieces to impart into their lives now?
So, that expression, ants in your pants, like a lot of like the wiggles,
Yeah.
I am ADD and all of that. And I learned how to meditate. It was not easy. When I first started to try to meditate, I could not even keep my eyes closed, much less sit in one place and concentrate on my breathing. But I
Hmm.
medit I they call it a practice. That's because you have to practice to
Hmm.
to really get the hang of it. So I meditate. I stretch. I do it through yoga. I also take a strength class because, like so many women my age, I have osteoporosis. And if I fall, I will break. There is
Hmm.
not even a question. The fact that I haven't broken a hip yet is crazy. I mean, I weigh 110 pounds and I'm mighty. I last night I had a push-up contest with my 14-year-old great nephew. This is true. He beat me and he should beat me, but I did 30 push-ups. He did 32. So I keep myself fit and strong. I also surround myself with people who make me laugh. Laughter is the best medicine. I did not coin that phrase, but it is so true. I do what I love to do. What sustains me is great music, great dancing. I dance like a fool around my house. When I'm cooking, I've got Motown cranked up and I am dancing around. And I don't care if I look like an idiot because it's joy. That's what joy looks like. I love children and dogs. I'm obsessed with dogs. I pat every dog. When I'm walking with my friends, they get so annoyed with me because any like friendly dog that comes by, I have to stop and take a moment because not only does that make me happy, it makes the dog happy. And it reminds me of my dad, who was the same way. Dogs and children were what he was all about. I'm all about dogs and children. And I love great art. I can't make a stick figure. I can't draw anything or paint anything, but I appreciate art. Um, I can write crazy stories, and I do. I write all the time because it's a great way for me to express myself. I couldn't sit and knit if it was the last thing in the world, but other people do it that way. Some people, I mean, we all do it differently. We all have different things that make us feel alive. So
Mhm.
I say, find those things, what they are for you. I know what they are for me. I like reading. I'm a voracious reader. I read, and at any given time, I'm listening to an audiobook and reading a book. I read on Kindle because I can make the font really big and I don't have to wear glasses. It's awesome. I'd rather do it that way. I spend a lot of time with friends. I love eating. I love a good glass of wine. At some point in this lifetime, Michael, you and I are going to have a really nice bottle of wine together.
Here, here.
I don't know in what city, but you're welcome to come here. And I just think of what are the things that make you happy and make you feel alive, and then do them. I also am privileged enough now to give money away, and I give money away to the things that I think are going to make the world a better place.
Here, here.
And there is so much pain and suffering in this world. Sadly, I feel it. The thing that makes me so compassionate is also makes me vulnerable to everybody else's pain. And
Mhm.
so I feel that. But I also believe in redemption. I believe that we all have an opportunity to turn our lives around. You are a credible example of that. I was, I grew up in a family where nobody abused each other, so that wasn't something that happened for me.
Mhm.
And I grew up in a family where people didn't drink alcohol, so I didn't grab that as a crutch. I'm grateful for that. But I had other crutches, and I had other habits that I had to learn to get rid of that were self destructive. And I've battled depression always. I'm on antidepressants, I'm never going off of them. We live in a time where there are these incredible drugs that for people who need them are a gift. It's a safety net. I won't go below a certain threshold because I have that SSRI on board in
Mhm.
my body, and I'm not ashamed to admit it. I'll tell anybody. Yeah, I'm on an antidepressant because if not, I risk getting really, really low. But I don't need anything for my anxiety because I treat that with meditation. I take bubble baths. I mean, I have all these ridiculous things that I do that work for me.
I
So
want, I
there you
want, I want to touch on something if you want to talk about it, but I think it's important for listeners to listen to this because I know that for me, I struggle with weight. I know some people struggle with different types of vices and things like that. It's kind of like how you just mentioned you're on antidepressants and things like that. But you're one that figured it out. You're the one overcame some of these things. For the listeners that's listening and maybe struggling, can you give them some words of encouragement or some advice in regards to how are you to able to meet something where it was at, and then all right, this is the issue. This is how I'm going to take care of this issue so it does not affect me anymore.
So I had eating disorders
Hmm.
before there was a phrase eating disorders. No one knew what this was. This was 1970, 71, 72, and I had full-blown anorexia, which at the time was not like a term that anybody knew. It was a medical term. And
Hmm.
20% of the people then, and I believe still now, but I could be wrong about that. The numbers could have changed, but certainly then, 20% of the victims died.
Wow.
And that is a very high number. And I was 17 years old, and I was already off to college 1,000 miles away from home because I was always in a rush to do everything better, faster. And I was in therapy for a couple of years to get past that, but it was therapy that you would never now have a person with eating disorders do. It was psychoanalysis, which is
Hmm.
to say that I lied on a couch and talked, and the therapist sat in a chair and literally fell asleep. Once I caught him asleep. He said nothing. And so the fact that I survived and got past that is kind of a miracle. But I figured out over time that I was doing this to myself We do this to ourselves. When we have an issue with food, we're trying to fill up a hole inside of ourselves. We're trying to, whether you're eating too much or not enough, whether you're starving yourself or you have bulimia and you're eating a lot and then inducing vomiting so that it won't stick, all of it is about trying to fill up a hole in your heart, a missing piece, and you're using food in a way that actually is hurting you.
Hmm.
So it's about over time learning to fill that hole some other way,
Hmm.
learning to do self-care, learning what is it to be nice to yourself? Is it eating 6 brownies right now? Or is it going and taking a hot bath? I mean, that's like a real simple one. Or is it going and putting on headphones and listening to your favorite music and breathing as slowly as you can? I have all these little tricks that I've learned over the years. I'm teaching them to my 5-year-old granddaughter. As you breathe in, slowly say, I breathe in to calm my body. And then as you're breathing out, as I breathe out, I smile.
Hmm.
As I breathe out, I smile. And if you say that and do that for 10 minutes, maybe even 5 minutes, your body will start to relax. You won't have that urge. You know, we all get urges to do things and we like pick up cigarettes or we pick up dope or, you know, we're self medicating. That's what this all is.
Right.
We self medicate with food, we self medicate with bad behaviors, with gambling, and it's all, I mean, these things are all so readily available. We become addicted to video games. I mean, now that's a new problem. It's a whole new problem for a generation. These
Hmm.
kids, especially post COVID, these kids who don't relate to humans unless it's through a screen, and they're terrified to go out of the house. This is a problem, and it's an extension of these addictive behaviors. It's all part of the same thing. We don't know how to self-soothe. We need to learn how to self-soothe in healthy ways because we're all broken. We are all broken in different ways. And we watched our parents self-soothe with whatever. Maybe it was alcohol, maybe it was violence, maybe it was food. In my family, it was food. So a good way for me to learn to hurt my mother was to stop eating. She had always said, eat this, don't eat this, stop eating this. Hold hold in your stomach. You're eating too much. Why are you eating free? You know, all of this craziness. And I internalized all of it. And so I didn't know that's what I was doing, but I was like, I don't need food at all. Look at me. I cannot eat, and I'm going to be perfect like Twiggy, the model who everybody thinks is the picture of beauty, and she weighs 64 pounds, and I'm going to look just like that. And I weighed 73 pounds as a freshman in college, and I had a full course load, and I was on the dean's list, and I lived in a little hippie commune, and I did my job and everybody else's job because I didn't need to sleep, because I didn't need to eat or sleep or do anything because I was going to be perfect. Nonsense.
Wow.
That was mental illness.
Wow.
It was just like a crazy kind of mental illness, but it was mental illness, and
Hmm.
nobody should be afraid to own up to their mental illness because again, we're all broken. Shame is useless. We shouldn't feel shame. We should get past that. We're taught to feel shame. It's a bad message. Own it and move forward.
Wow. Joanne, thank you for sharing that. That was so important to share that part of your story. When a listener picks up your book and read your book, what is it that you want from them to take away from your story?
You can rewrite your own story. You can move through adversity looking at the challenges as opportunities for growth. You can always find a way to be better. You can always find a way to meet the challenges that you know what they are. I knew what mine were. I couldn't stop. I was on a treadmill. I was going a million miles an hour. And at the end of the day, I would have a hit of weed because then I could go, didn't need that, right? That's not what I should have been doing. I should have been doing something else to slow myself down so that I didn't get to that point at the end of the day where I was like panting with exhaustion. The world is going to give you all the opportunities you need to be a better human and give you all the challenges. And do not hang out at that pity pot because you grew up in poverty or because your father abandoned the family or because your mom was a crack addict. Okay, that's what you got. Now, what are you going to do with the hand you were dealt? Because you had no choice on those things, but you have a big choice on what you do moving forward. And if you listen to Michael's story and what he overcame, it makes my story look like I grew up in fairyland. So I want you to read my book because it's one more tool in your arsenal, and you will learn about how to feel gratitude when things are at their absolute worst. You will learn how to remember that this moment is just a moment, and there's going to be other moments of pure joy in your life. And you're going to feel survivor guilt that I get to spend all this great time with my sister's grandchildren and she didn't. But okay, they have me now. And I'm going to bring every one of her gifts to them as best I can. And you're going to laugh a lot because there are a lot of funny moments in my book. And I was in rock and roll radio, so I have crazy stories to report. And in the end, you know, it's all good. So enjoy, and please listen to my podcast as well. It's called In This Story, 4 minutes long. I promise you'll laugh.
Before we get out of here, Joanne, your story is truly remarkable of one overcoming so many adversities, been faced with so many challenges, but you faced them, you overcame them, and now you're sharing your story. For our listeners that's listening, what are some key takeaways that they could take from your life, from your story, that they could impart into their lives now?
Well, I think the fact that trying to see yourself as a survivor and not a victim, that's a big one. It's really easy to see yourself as a victim and get angry and then want to lash out. That's
Mhm.
useless. Also, question what's serving you in your life? What's really serving you, right? Are your addictions serving you, or are you stronger than them? Don't be afraid to ask for help because you can't do it alone. I didn't do it alone. Michael didn't do it alone. Ask for help. And when you have a setback, because you will, because you're human, get back up. Get back up and try again and again and again and again. You fall off that horse, get back on that horse. And it's scary, and get through it, and you can do it. And keep giving yourself positive messages. So many of us go through life saying, who do you think you are, right?
Mhm.
You can't do this. Like, you're going to get a master's degree. I bet you said that to yourself 5 times. I'm going to get a master's degree? Are you kidding me? You said that to yourself, didn't you? At one point or another?
I struggled with that for a while because I know when we were speaking earlier, I joined the military to use my GI Bill, but I did not get my college degree until close to like 20 years later, until I got out of the service.
And I think of
Well,
all the African Americans who fought in the world wars who didn't even get the GI Bill. That makes me
right.
so furious. And then I take that anger and I do something with that anger to try to make the world a better place now and to move things forward. So I would say what we tell ourselves really matters. So if you're telling yourself things that are not serving you, stop that voice and come up with a better message. I say, how would you encourage your friend if she was in that situation or he was in that situation? You wouldn't say, "Yeah, you suck. You can't go to business school. You
Correct.
can't get a master's." No, you would say, you would encourage that person. Speak to yourself like you would speak to your best friend because believe me, there's no better friend you have than yourself. So give yourself empowering messages. If you say it enough times, you're going to convince yourself and you're going to believe it that you have the strength to overcome adversity.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Joanne, for being a guest on Overcoming Adversity podcast. If anybody wanted to know more about your podcast, book you on their podcast, know more about your book, where can they find you?
Well, first of all, I will respond to every single email. So I would say go to my website, which is very simple Joanne, my name, Joanne, hyphen, just a dash, Greene, Greene.com. And it said there's a place to contact me, and just contact me. And on my website, you'll find links to get my book, see videos, funny things. And I have a few different podcasts, but the one I'm focusing on right now is the short one, In This Story.
Absolutely. Well, Joanne, thank you so much for being a guest. I truly, truly enjoyed this conversation.
I did as well. Best of luck to you, Michael.
Thank you so much. Guys, if you like this podcast, make sure you leave a message. Also, share with a family and a friend. Until next time, God bless.
Ain't complain at all. Couple dollars in my pocket, know it come and go. Been working on my body, getting healthier. Thank God for clarity.